Now, a ruptured femur, is that what you call it? A ruptured?
Yeah, well, it's split in two.
It's split in two. Now, I've been told that when you break your femur, you're critically injured. I mean, that's a very serious injury, right?
Right.
And here you are, a skateboarder. We'll talk about that in a minute. But first of all, the crash itself, did you have any warning?
Seconds before, 10 seconds before, I'd say.
Were you just taking off when this happened?
No. Actually, I was flying with a very good friend of mine, Jonsson, who had come from Iceland and had his pilot license. And we were flying towards Squamish. And in one of the valleys that we were flying in, there were some clouds in the distance. And, you know, when you're flying in a small Cessna plane, you know, it's quite unsafe to be going through clouds in a valley because, you know, your vision is very, you know, blocked and you can't see what's coming. So Guðni made the decision to turn around in the valley, and we decided to go into a neighboring valley. And I'd say the only real warning that I sort of had was this unease in his kind of spirit. You know, I really felt, yeah, an unease. And I'd spent 3 months with Guðni. That's how long his stay was here in Canada. And, you know, when you spend a lot of time with somebody, you know, you get to know just, I guess, their mannerisms and yeah, like before I knew it, he was saying we're going down, and there was sort of a tremor in the plane. And that's when I pretty much closed my eyes and hoped for the best. I remember the plane beginning to sort of swoop down, and that's when I just braced for impact, and impact came.
Did you lose consciousness?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. When you came to, did you realize what had happened, or were you a little bit spaced out?
Well, my very good friend Elliot and his girlfriend Leah were also in the plane. And, you know, my first memory of waking up was Elliot there beside me. And the very first thing I said to Elliot was my seatbelt. You know, my seatbelt, get my seatbelt off. Because what had happened was the plane was at almost like a 90-degree angle. And Leah was behind me. And her weight would have, you know, been on my chest because I was hanging in my seatbelt. And, you know, she was, you know, wanted to get out of there. She was, you know, it was life or death. She was covered in diesel, and obviously she's kind of trampling on me, and I don't blame her. She's, you know, it's chaos, you know, so she was trying to get out. And so what that was doing was it was putting a lot of pressure on my internal organs, and I actually suffered some internal bleeding. And so my very first words to Elliot were, you know, get my seatbelt off. And I guess subconsciously, you know, even though I was knocked out, I knew that the first thing that needed to take place was this pressure had to be relieved.
Yeah. And did you know right away that you'd severely damaged your leg?
No.
So you tried to walk?
No, what happened was, so, you know, after just, I guess, 2 minutes of trying to get my seatbelt off because it was sort of lodged, I finally got it off, and seeing that Guðni had passed away.
You could tell?
Elliot at the time said, Dave, just let's just get out of here. Guðni's breathing. He's going to be okay, you know. But it definitely didn't look very promising. And so I said, okay, let's go. And then Elliot said, Dave, look at your leg, man. And so what had happened was, when I was bracing for impact, stretching out my legs, the seat had dislodged, and it actually snapped my femur. And what I was looking at was almost like a second knee joint. What had happened was my leg had folded underneath my seat, and to my horror, my leg was actually, you know, folded underneath the seat with my body weight on it. But Elliot, you know, he was unhurt, which was a miracle, complete miracle. And he pushed the seat up, and I was able to dislodge my leg, which was, you know, a tremendous amount of pain there. And then Elliot said, you know, get on my shoulders, Dave. And Elliot carried me, man. It was tremendous what Elliot did on that day. He put me on his shoulders, and me and Elliot used to work out, you know, back in those high school days when you're trying to, I guess, get all buff and impress the ladies. And And I remember getting on his shoulders and him slipping because we had kind of crashed beside a creek and there was slippery rocks everywhere. And with me on his back, he was struggling, you know. And I was kind of yelling at him, you know, come on, man, you can do this. You know, I used to see you working out. I used to bench press 140 pounds, kind of encouraging him, you know. And so we, on our way to go see go to where Leah was, we actually sort of slipped. And at that time, I actually tried to stand on my leg, tried to brace myself, and the leg just kind of noodled. And finally, when we were able to sit, in a safe distance away from the plane, I guess that's kind of when the surrealness, the impact really came in.
Yeah. You were airlifted out of there.
We were hours later.
How did they find you?
Well, all planes give off a signal.
Right.
Cessna planes, because the battery isn't as big as commercial airliners, gives off a signal. I think it's somewhere in between 15 and 20 minutes. Every 15, 20 minutes, it just sends a signal of its location. The reason why I guess it takes so long in between is because, you know, if you're very, very far away, they'd rather have the signal for a long period of time, right, every 20 minutes, rather than if it were to go every 5 minutes, you know, the battery would only last so long. And so they saw our signal, and but for whatever reason, they didn't call search and rescue until about 6 p.m. that day, and I'm not sure why, but and so it did take around 5 hours there.
5 hours with this serious injury. You're bleeding. Your leg is shattered. Did you go into shock?
I did, yeah. Actually, just talking to Elliot the other day, we were talking about, you know, the plane crash, and he told me how he was kind of just saying, yeah, I remember when we moved from that embankment to underneath the tree because it was beginning to rain. And I don't really remember that very well. And that must have been because I was in such a state of shock and in such a, I guess, such a state of just, you know, I was lost. I was, it was a moment of terror, you know.